In Manhattan, prominent Tongs and their gangs fought for control over streets and their lucrative markets. For example, Mott, Bayard, Canal, and Mulberry Street were all under the control of the Onlyong Tong. Meanwhile, streets Dwyer, Pell, Bowery, Grand, and Hester were controlled by their rivals, the Hip Sing Tong, and their affiliated Flying Dragons. If you go down to Brooklyn and Queens, you would see other such groups like the White Tigers and the Freemasons. But our focus will remain on Manhattan. As for the Ghost Shadows themselves, they began as a mere group of a few dozen street thugs, led by Nicky Louie, who got involved in a life of crime after being raised poor and neglected. Just like Louie, most of the initial Ghost Shadow members, in fact, were teenagers or just under 20. Starting off with small scandals, they soon found themselves at the forefront of Chinese street life. If you recall, the Onlyong Tong had control over Mott Street, and that is where our first instance of violence occurs. The story of the Ghost Shadows versus the White Eagles, two gangs who were affiliated with the same Tong. Packed with stores ranging from tea shops to massage parlors, Mott Street was easily one of Chinatown's liveliest markets. You may have remembered earlier that Mott Street was controlled by the Onlyong Tong. Specifically, the Tong ran a gambling ring in the streets underground. Exactly how much money they made from these small businesses and gambling rings is largely unknown. It's called underground money for a reason. But in this conflict, it isn't the Onlyong Tong themselves who are firing the shots. While controlling the streets of the gambling rings led to lucrative profits for the Tongs, being the protectors of the streets and such rings were how the gangs made their money. Some sources say that the gangs who protected Mott Street were racking up as much as $2,000 a week per member.
At the time, in the early 1970s, the White Eagles were the protectors of the gambling rings. The Ghost Shadows were only recently affiliated with the Onlyong Tong, and they were seeing no profits from Mott Street. To make a name for themselves, the Ghost Shadows, led by Kuan Yin, orchestrated a plan to drive out the White Eagles from the gambling market.
In the span of just a few weeks in 1973, a White Eagles member was found dead in a lake, and a series of Eagle bars were raided and taken over. Keep in mind that this fight was for the right to affiliate with the Onlyong Tong, and so when the Tong saw their group outrun by this younger and newer gang, the leaders soon switched over control of the casinos to the Ghost Shadows. War had begun, but with the White Eagles pushed out of Mott Street, they stood little chance at beating the Ghost Shadows. Regardless, the murders and fighting continued. The most infamous murders took place at the local Wong Ki rice shop on Mott Street. There, two White Eagle members were eating when Nicky Louie and other Ghost Shadow members broke into the store and stabbed both men dead. In another instance, a White Eagle member was found walking in Mott territory, and he was subsequently gagged and killed. And by the late 1970s, Mott Street became firmly under Ghost Shadow control. But that doesn't mean things were peaceful in Chinatown. If you recall, Chinatown was home to another prominent Tong, the Hip Sing Tong. The wars between the Onlyong Tong and Hip Sing Tong date back as early as the 1920s, with prominent gang leaders such as Tom Lee. But with the influx of Asian teenage immigrants, Tongs began hiring young gangs to do their dirty work for them. The Ghost Dragons were the main gang for the Onlyong Tong, but for the Hip Sing Tong, they ran with another group, known as the Flying Dragons. Just like the Ghost Shadows, the Flying Dragons were another young gang run by immigrant teenagers. Their leader, Michael Chen, was in a powerful position. He was related to the Hip Sing Tong's leader, Benny Ong, and as a result, the up-and-coming gang soon merged with the prominent Tong, taking some of their profits on Dwyer, Pell, Bowery, Grand, and Hester streets. With over 50 members, the Flying Eagles would become a part of Hip Sing Tong's plan to remove the Onlyong Tong from Chinatown. Starting with the murder of two Ghost Shadow teens, Kim Ching and Yuk Hui, in 1976, 30 murders were documented over the next year. The violence would continue on and off over the next few years. However, peace would only be achieved when 25 gang members were indicted in what is known as a RICO case.